Welcome to Middle Math Academy, Ratio Tables and Graphing, level number 5. If you're looking for any lessons that are a little bit less challenging, make sure to check out Ratio Tables levels 1 through 4. Our learning targets today are I can write equivalent ratios in a ratio table, and I can graph equivalent ratios on a coordinate plane. Take a minute and rate yourself before the lesson. 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. How confident do you feel about these learning targets before we start? All right, now we're going to take some notes. Make sure to write what I write. Our first note is ratio tables represent equivalent ratios. And throughout today's lesson, remember you can always pause the video if you need more time. Equivalent ratios have the same value, and we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. And then our last note for today is we graph equivalent ratios by using quantities from the ratio table to create ordered pairs. Step number 1 says fill in the ratio table using the ratio description. For every yard, there are 3 feet. So if it's just yard singular with no S, that means it's just 1. So for every 1 yard, there are 3 feet. Now with ratios, every time I increase one quantity, I need to keep the ratio equivalent on the other side. So for example, if I increase my yards by 1, I need to increase my feet by 3. So I can continue that pattern. I increase my yards by 1 again. I have to increase my feet by 3. So 3 yards is the same as 9 feet. Go ahead and pause the video and fill in the rest of this table. For yards, all of your values should be increasing by 1 all the way up to 12. And for feet, your values should be increasing by 3 all the way up to 36. Step number 2 says the value of the ratio is blank. In our notes, we talked about the value of the ratio and equivalent ratios. Equivalent ratios have the same value. Now, how do you figure out the value? We're going to divide. We're going to take 36, or actually, you can choose any of these values. I'm going to choose this one right here. You'll always get the same value. So I'm going to take my feet, 21, and divide it by my yards, 7. And 21 divided by 7 is 3. Now you can choose any value. Okay, you can choose any of these. So you could do 12 divided by 4 and you would get 3. As long as you're doing feet divided by inches, you will get the same value, which is 3. Now, why does the value of a ratio matter? Well, I can always multiply my yards times 3 to get my feet, right? 1 times 3 is 3, 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9. Or I can take my feet and divide it by 3 to get my yards. We'll talk more about that later. Let's go ahead and move on to step number 3. All right, in step number 3 through 5, we're going to focus on this graphing piece. Now, if you completed level number 4, the numbers were already scaled for you. Today, you're going to write in the numbers. So it's extremely important that you're really neat with your work. Now, this first column is going to be our x-axis. So why don't we write that title first for our x? We have yards. Make sure you're writing with me. And I highly suggest using a pencil. And then our y-axis is going to be feet. I don't know why my T is so far away from my E, but whatever. All right, and then our title, we're going to make our y feet versus our x yards. So we have feet versus yards. Remember, you can always pause if you need more time. Now, we need to figure out what we're counting by for our yards and our feet. Let's focus on our yards first. Okay, so we're counting by ones in our table. So I think it makes sense for us to just count by ones on our graph as well. On graphs, you can't count by ones and then suddenly count by fives. Whatever you decide, you have to stick with. Okay, so we have 0 here. And I would make little tick marks on each line. Trust me, it really does make a difference. So under this tick mark, I'll write 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to go all the way up to 12. Pause the video and make sure you have this down. Now for our feet, we were skip counting by threes, so it makes sense that we do the same thing for our y-axis. And once again, right at these lines, I'm going to put a little tick mark to show where I'm going to write my number. 3, 6, 9, all the way up to the top. Extremely, extremely neat. Pause the video, make sure you have this down. My y-axis goes from 0 to 36. And then the last step is we're just going to graph our points. So you can think about our two values in our table as an ordered pair, where our first number represents our x and our second number represents our y. You can also think about this like dunking a basketball. When you dunk a basketball, you run first, then jump. So for our first points, 1, 3, we're going to run to 1 and then jump to 3 and put a dot. All right, we did the first one. Next one, we have 2, 6. We're going to dunk the basketball, so we have to run first to 2 and then jump to 6. Go over to 3, up to 9, and you're going to continue this pattern for the whole table. Pause the video, then come back to check your work. Here's what you should have for your graph. If you made any mistakes, it's no problem. Just correct your errors and then flip to page 2. On page number 2, we're practicing the same thing we did in our last example. So I want you to complete page number 2, pause the video, take your time, look at the example, and then come back to the video. Pause the video, check your work for problem A. On page 3, we're going to continue practicing what we've already been working on. The only difference is you're going to label your ratio table headers. So I'll get you started and then you can complete the rest of the page on your own. It says Lindsay subscribed to a new music platform. Every 3 months, she is charged $9. That's a pretty good deal nowadays. So we're talking about months and how much she's charged in dollars. So let's label months and dollars charged. Hopefully yours is a little bit neater than mine. And then it says every 3 months, she's charged $9. So go ahead and pause the video Complete the rest of C and then come back to the video. Here's what you should have for C. Pause the video, fix any errors, make sure you pay close attention to the details, make sure your X and Y axis are labeled and that you have a title. Once you're done checking your work, complete the rest of page 3 and then come back to the video. Page number 4. Page number 4 is really similar to what we've been working on. We're just going to push it a little bit further. Problem E says the ratio of cups of lemonade powder to ounces of water is 2 to 30. Okay, so I can see that in our ratio table, we definitely need to label what the numbers represent. So we have cups of lemonade, that came first, and 2 came first. So I know I'm going to write cups of lemonade here. I decided to write in pencil, so hopefully you can read that. It says cups of lemonade powder and ounces of water. Okay, so I see that we have a space before our first ratio. The reason why I did that is because I want us to include the value of our ratio in our ratio table on this problem. So to find the value of the ratio, if this is X and this is Y, we're going to do Y divided by X, or 30 divided by 2. That tells us the value of our ratio, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. So what that means is for every 1 cup of lemonade powder, there are 15 ounces of water. Because remember, the value of the ratio helps us identify the pattern. I can always multiply my lemonade powder by 15 to get my ounces of water. Another way to think about it is every time my lemonade powder increases by 1, my ounces of water increases by 15. That should be 45. There we go. And once again, 3 times 15 is 45. Now, before we finish the rest of this problem, I want you to just fill in the rest of this ratio table and then fill in the ratio table for problem F. Then come back to the video. For problem E, your value should be increasing by 1 for lemonade powder. And then for ounces of water, it should be increasing by 15. Check your work, fix any errors. Make sure you finish the ratio table for problem F, then come back to the video. I'm not going to go over all of problem F, but I do want to go over the value of the ratio to make sure you got it. So we will take our money earned, make sure you labeled your ratio table, and divide it by songs played. And 25 divided by 2 is 12 and 5/10. This means for every 1 song played, the artist earns $12.50. And we should really add a 0 there because money always goes to the hundreds place. So our songs will be increasing by 1, and then our money earned will be increasing by $12.50 each time. What I want you to do now is go back up to E and fill in the graph. Make sure you label everything, look back at examples if you need to, and then come back to the video. Check your work for problem E, fix any errors, and pay close attention to details. Then complete the graph for problem F. Flip to page 5. On page 5, you're going to create your own ratio descriptions. So a hint is using the keyword for every, but you don't have to. So you'll come up with your own ratio description, and you can look at other problems for examples. Something like, for every 6 cats, there are 2 dogs. Don't use that example, but something like that. After you write your ratio description, you'll fill in your ratio table, write the value of the ratio, and create a graph. You're going to do that for problems G and H. I'm not going to go over anything on this page. Once you finish page number 5, come back to the video. Last but not least, page number 6. Go ahead and complete this page on your own. Then come back to the video. Now that you've completed page 6, you're going to turn back to page number 1 and rate yourself after the lesson for each learning target. So if you remember at the beginning of this lesson, you rated yourself 1 through 5 on how confident you felt with these learning targets. Now that we've gotten more practice in, you're going to do the same thing for after the lesson. 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. If you're interested in more ratio and proportional reasoning lessons or any tables, graphing, we have tons of stuff at Middle Math Academy, so I encourage you to check them out. Thanks for joining us today.